Okay, so for this worksheet, probably the most useful thing is the flaps with the perfect squares, okay? Or I don't have that with me right now. So I'm going to use the multiplication table, and you notice down your multiplication table in your notebooks that the bold, there's a diagonal line of bold numbers, okay? And I've gone ahead and circled them here, okay? And that's what we're going to use to help us do this, okay? Or that page with the flaps in your notebook. All right, so the first thing I want you to see is, you see 1 is the square root of. Well, we're going to look at that first perfect square there, okay? The square root of 1 is 1, okay? And then the square root of 2, look, it's 2 times 2, right? The square root of 2 is 4. So I'm just write a 4 in there. And if you look, 9 is 3 times 3, so the square root of 9 is 3. Okay? And so on and so forth. We're just following the line here. The square root of 16 is 4. Okay? And then the next one is 25. It's 5 times 5, so the square root of 25 is 5. The next one is 36. The square root of 36, 6 times 6 is 36. The one after that one is 49. The square root of 49 is 7 because 7 times 7 is 49. Okay? And then after that, for 8, it's 64. The square root of 64 is 8 because 8 times 8 is 64. And then after that, it's the square root of 81. The square root of 81 is 9 because 9 times 9 is 81. After that, square root of 100 is 10. Okay, square root of 100 is 10 because 10 times 10 is 100. And then I'm just going to go ahead. You can follow along here. 11 is 121. The square root of 121 is 11. And you can just follow along the numbers here, but you can look and fill this in yourself, or you can what I put in. 144, the square root of 169 is 13, the square root of 196 is 14, the square root of 225 is 15, the square root of 256 is 16, the square root of 289 is 17, the square root of 324 is 18, the square root of 361 is 19, the square root of 400 is 20. Okay, so you can just follow along down here on the your multiplication table to get these numbers. Okay, those darkened bold numbers going diagonally down your multiplication table. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is fill in the square root of 10, for example. I'll do a few of these with you, where that goes on this number line. Okay, so the square root of 10. I want you to look here, okay? So once you have this filled in, you can use what you have on your number line here, okay, to do the rest of this. The square root of 10, well, the square root of 10 is between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. Okay, so what these lines on the side here are for is, since 9 is the next number smaller than 10 and 16 is the next number bigger than 10 for perfect squares, I want you to write those on the side. The square root of 9 and the square root of 16. Okay, and that's 3 and that's 4. Okay, so the square root of 9, the square root of 16, hey, this is where the square root of 10 goes. It goes between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. It goes between 3 and 4. Alright, so let's look at 260. So 260, the square root of 260, if we look on our number line, well, the square root of 260 is going to be bigger than the square root of 225, or it's going to be bigger than the square root of 256, and it's smaller than the square root of 289. So it's going to be between 16 and 17, right? 256 is the next lowest perfect square. So I'm going to write 256. And then 260, well, the next highest perfect square is 289. So I'm going to write 289. Okay? And the square root of 256 here, right, is 16. And the square root of 289 is 17. Okay, so this is where the square root of 260 goes. It's bigger than 256, it's smaller than 289. So you're going to write square root of 260 in there. Okay, all right, let's look at the next one, 130. For the square root of 130, let's look to see the next lowest and then the next highest perfect square. Well, 130, okay, it's bigger than 121. Right? And it's smaller than 144. So the square root of 130 is going to be between these two. Okay? So square root of 121, I'm going to write that one. That's the next lowest one. And then the square root of 144, that's the next highest one. And the square root of 121 was 11. The square root of 144 was 12. Okay? So 130 is going to go between 11 and 12, so I'm going to write square root of 130 in here. Okay, let's do another one. Maybe I'll do two more with you. Square root of 27. Well, 27 is between which of these perfect squares? It's between 25, square root of 25, and 36. It's bigger than 25, smaller than 36. So I'm going to write square root of 25 and the square root of 36. Okay, square root of 27 is between those two perfect squares. So this is 5, this is 6. So between 5 and 6 goes the square root of 27. Okay, I'm going to do one last one with you. I want to jump down to, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And I want you to look at the square root of 62. Okay, so the square root of 62. Let me see if I can zoom and focus. Okay, so the square root of 62. Now the square root of 62, so the square root of 62 is going to be between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64. It's between those two numbers. It's bigger than 49, less than 64. So it's going to go between 7 and 8. So I'm going to put square root of 49, square root of 64. It's between those two, 7 and 9. Okay? Now, notice there are 2 points between 7 and 9. Okay? Which one do you put it closer to? Or which one do you put it in? You know, this one here or this one up here, okay? Because there's 2 of them between 7 and 8. I'm sorry, 7 and 8. Square root of 64 is 8. Okay, it's between 7 and 8. Now notice the square root of 62 is closer to 64 than it is to 49, okay? So you want to put it at the dot that's closer to 64. Okay, you want to put it at the dot that's close, because 62 is closer to 64 than it is to 49. Okay, so in this one, this point here is closer to the square root of 64. So this is where I would put the square root of 62. Okay.